Welcome back to Try and Test It. I'm Elaine, and in this episode, I'm going to show 6 tips on how to build Power Apps Canvas apps that can be consumed by screen reader. Now, before I get started, I want to let you know that I have time-coded the tips in the description below, so be sure to check them out. Without further ado, let's get started. Tip number 1. So Microsoft has recommended a few software combinations that is supported for consuming Power Apps with screen reader. So for Windows, there's Edge Generator. For Mac OS, there's Safari and VoiceOver. For Android, there's Power Apps and TalkBack. And for iOS, there's Power Apps and VoiceOver. Tip number 2. Always ensure that the screens on your app has a name that describes what the screen does. Do not leave the default screen name, or do not try to shorten the screen names by using abbreviations such as SCRN or SRN. So for example, over here, I have a screen that have all the accessible controls. So what I'll do, I'll rename this screen as Screen with Accessible Elements. And I have a second screen created over here, which is a confirmation pop-up, basically kind of a dialog box to ask the user if they want to exit the form. So I'll just rename this as Screen Exit Confirmation. By doing so, when the screen reader reads the screen name, the user would know what every screen does. Tip number 3. For any elements on a form that you want the screen reader to read to the user, use accessible label or text depending on the controls that you are using. So for example, over here, we have a few different kinds of controls on a form. So for any controls like image, shapes, icons, drop-down lists, and date picker, make sure that the accessible label is populated with a meaningful description that describes the control. If the image is decorative, such as this image over here, if it's decorative, then make sure that the accessible label is empty. So the screen reader would not read it out when the user clicks on it. For other controls such as radio buttons, text input, chat box, and button, make sure that the text is populated with a description that describes what the control does, because the screen reader will read out the text of the control. For buttons, the screen reader also will read out the display mode. So if it's disabled, make sure that you select it as disabled, because then the screen reader will tell the user that this button is disabled and you cannot click on it. So any interactive elements on the screen should have accessible label or text populated so that the user knows what to do with that input element. Because for example, if you do not put an accessible label on the image, and the image is something the user needs to know, then when the user click on it, it wouldn't know what it's clicking on and what to do with it. Tip number 4. When building dialog boxes or pop-up window, always build it on a separate screen and navigate the user to the separate screen. Avoid using the visible property to show the dialog box, because the screen reader might still read all the elements behind the dialog box even though it is invisible or made read-only. So one example is, I want to have a confirmation screen when the user click on this X icon over here. Instead of creating a label that is made visible when the user click on this icon, what I do is I navigate the user to a separate screen and I have the yes/no confirmation on this screen instead. In saying that, do make sure that there's no elements overlapping each other as well, because or else when the user clicks on it, the screen reader might read more than one elements, and this will confuse the user as well. Tip number 5, use live label if you want the screen reader to make any announcements to changes on the form. For example, if the user have add or delete a record on the form and you want the screen reader to announce it to the user, create a live label so that the screen reader will announce it. I'm going to show you an example over here. So I want the screen reader to announce when the user select the yes or no button. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a live label. I'm just going to first create a label over here. Let me change the color so that we could actually see it. Yeah. So what the screen reader going to do is it's going to announce the text on this label. So first of all, I need to enable the live settings. So I'll just go to the live property, and by default the live property is off. I need to change the settings either to assertive or polite. So the difference between assertive and polite is how the announcement is made. So if it's assertive, the screen reader will announce it immediately, interrupting all other announcements it's making. Whereas if it's polite, the screen reader will only make this announcement after it has finished announcing all the other properties or the other controls on the form. So depending on the situation, you decide whether you want to use assertive or polite. Now, I want the screen reader to announce the message based on the button the user click on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set a variable to store the message. So when the user click yes, I have an announce variable that store the message that says exit successful. And when I say no, I'm going to have the announce variable to store the message form is not submitted. What I'm going to do here is instead of having a hard-coded text, I'm going to change this to the variable. Which is announce. Now, whatever the user clicks, that is what the text going to be shown here, and that's what the screen reader going to read. One thing you need to remember is that the label always have to be visible. The screen reader would not read it if it's invisible. So sometimes you might not want users who are not using screen reader to see this message. So because you can't make the label invisible or else the screen reader might not read it, what you can do is to change the height to 0. In that case, the user now could not see the message. Tip number 6. If you want to put a hyperlink on the screen, use the button instead to launch the hyperlink, and on the button text, put a descriptive text that describes where it brings the user to. In that case, the screen reader will read the description of the button instead of the whole hyperlink. For example, I'll create a button over here, and I want this to go to my web page. So on select, I'll just launch. I'll use the launch function, and I'll go to https elaine.com. And on the button, I put a meaningful text that describes where this button is leading to. So this would be launch, or maybe it be navigate, open Elaine's blog. In that case, the screen reader will read the text on the button, and the user would know that when they click on this button, it will open Elaine's blog. So now it's time to test out the accessibility control that we have built in Power Apps. I have here my voiceover enabled, as you can probably hear. And we'll just go to the app and see how the app works with the screen reader on my iPhone. Yeah.
Close button.
As you can probably hear, the navigation works differently once you have your screen reader turned on for your mobile. So do go and do a Google.
Accessibility app. Author, Elaine Yu. Environment, Elenetrial. Marked as favorite, button.
Yeah, do a Google on how to navigate through your phone. What are the gestures to be used once you have the screen reader turned on, so you don't have problems using it like me.
Accessibility app. Author, Elaine Yu. Environment, Elenetrial. Accessibility app. Accessibility app opening, ellipsis.
Yeah, so now I had it open, and these are the controls that I've shown just now.
Yes, radio button, unchecked, 1 of 2.
We have the drop-down list where I have entered the accessible label to say select your favorite colors. So now when I click on the drop-down list, that's what I expect the screen reader to say.
Select your favorite color. Blue. Pop-up button. List box pop-up. Double tap to activate the picker.
Yeah, so I'm going to activate the picker now.
Selected. Blue. List start. Red. Yellow. Orange.
See how it reads all the different items on the list as you select them. And if I want orange, I'll just double select.
Select your favorite color. Orange.
Yeah. Now, same goes for all the other controls, and like chat box, it will actually read out the text. So if I click on a chat box,
do you agree? Tick box. Unchecked.
Yeah.
Double tap to toggle setting. Checked.
So that's basically how it works. It's either reading the accessible label for controls like shape, icon, drop-down list, date picker, and then for things like date input, buttons, text input, radio buttons, chat box, it will read the text. So let's now go to the icon, your exit icon, where we have set up a dialog box for the confirmation exit. So I've set the accessible label for the icon as exit. So that's what I expect when I click on it.
Exit button.
So the screen reader have read out exit, and to trigger it, I'll just double tap.
Exit, screen exit confirmation.
Yeah, see how now it reads out the screen name. So that's why it's important to put a screen name that describe what the screen does, so that the user would know what to expect when they go to the screen. If you use screen 1 or aberration SCRN1, then the user wouldn't able to understand what's the screen and why are they there. So we have the exit label over here that we created with a yes, no, and I have a live label. So the screen reader will make an announcement depending on which button I select. So now if I click yes, the screen reader will announce and say exit successful.
Yes, button. Yeah, exit successful.
Yeah, but you don't see the live label because we have set the height to 0. Just make sure that the live label is still visible though, because if it's invisible, then the screen reader wouldn't announce me. And last thing we have is the button over here. So this button launch a link. So instead of having a hyperlink, because we don't want the screen reader to read out the hyperlink, firstly the hyperlink might be really long, and then the users would not understand what is the meaning of that hyperlink, where is it bringing you to. So what we do is we create a button, and the button will launch a hyperlink, and on the text of the button we describe where it is bringing the user to. So for instance over here, this is going to launch my blog. So I have open Elaine's blog. When I click on it, that's what it means.
Open Elaine's blog button.
Yeah, and when I launch it,
Open Power App, Safari, skip to content, in page link.
Yeah, so see how it opens to my blog. So that is how it works with screen reader. So now you can see why it's very important to build accessible apps, because if anyone wants to use the screen reader and you do not have the accessibility enabled, and you don't have the accessibility controls set up, then the user will not be able to use it. So that's all for today. Thank you for watching. For more Power Apps accessibility content, I've left the link to my playlist at the top of the video and at the description below. If you like my content, please give a thumbs up. And if you want to watch more Power Apps content, please subscribe to my channel. Bye!